right, this social media ban, in case you didn't know, Australia is the first country in the entire world to introduce a social media ban for kids under 16 years of age. Now, everyone is celebrating this. They're saying how groundbreaking this new law is. Am I missing something? Because I don't see it as groundbreaking. I see it as the government having even more access to what we do online, even more control over what we do with our families. Why are we celebrating this? Why are we celebrating censorship and silencing of people's rights? I don't know. Am I the strange one? Because I see this as nothing but damaging and a step backwards for our civil liberties, especially in a time like this when, we've got this Trump phenomenon going on. Everyone is really coming back to having their own rights, to having freedom of speech. We're no longer controlled by the woke left, but this is just a step backwards, and this is typical Australia, right? This doesn't happen anywhere else, obviously, because we're the first country. And it's just this obsession with the government having all of this control over every aspect of our lives. Government should be there to freaking fix potholes and collect our taxes and care for our medical system and deal with international relations and trade and things like that. You don't need to be controlling the internet for 16-year-olds. Get away. Get away. This is not in your jurisdiction. So they're saying that they're doing it because it's protecting the young kids. Now, I'm going to admit something here. I drank the Kool-Aid for a while. I said, look, I know that bullying is a massive issue for kids, huge. Like, it's really upsetting how many kids have taken their own lives, how much mental health problems there are going on with kids. But then I realized, hang on, this is not a government issue. This is a parental issue. The government doesn't need to be telling parents, your child can look at this, they can't look at this, they can look at this, they can't look at this. No, that's not something that the government needs to micromanage. This is a parental issue, and parents should be able to set rules for their children as they see fit. Each child is different. They're different maturity. They have different needs. They have different desires. They have different friendship groups. They're in different situations. There is not a one-size-fits-all solution to this. And it's just insane to me that the government is now having control over these niche social issues. It truly is resembling socialism. Like, that's what happens under socialism and communism. So this is a really worrying and concerning step backwards for us as a democracy. And they're saying it's to protect children. I don't see it as protecting children at all. I see that as a massive excuse to brainwash us all into thinking that the government has our backs and our best interests at heart. And they just don't, because they're doing it and they're using it as a segue to get around this dumped misinformation and disinformation bill that everyone freaked out about, and so they had to leave it because it's not right. Both of these things lead to censorship. They lead to the same road. What I think is going to happen is that this protection mechanism is going to lead to things like digital IDs. Every child, for us to be able to monitor them and their age, they have to give us all of their information, all of their parents' information, and it's going to go so on and so forth. We have to make sure that you're not under 16 so you can use social media. So give us all of this documentation to show that, and here you go, this is just easier, so we'll just give you a digital ID. And then all of a sudden, they can see everything we're doing online. They can see who we vote for. They can see which political affiliation we have, who we watch, who we listen to. That's not right. The internet shouldn't be an area where the government has control over our lives, because that's just scary. It's too much. Like, we need some personal responsibility and responsibility for our children, and they don't care about protection for our children, because if they did, they wouldn't have locked them away for 2 years over COVID and stunted their intellectual growth. That's what they did during COVID. Where was the protection there? Where's the protection when an 8-year-old child says, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, and I want to go on puberty blockers to stop my puberty from progressing, and therefore their entire growth and their hormones and their development is stunted for years to come. Literally, you can never go back from that. Yet the government are saying that that's okay? Where's the protection there? Where's the protection from these new batch of teachers who've just come out of university, who are infected with this woke mind virus and are spewing it onto their children who they teach in class. Where's that protection? Where's the protection from being in an echo chamber? Because that's what's happening in our schools. And the only antidote for that was being able to have alternative opinions outside of the classrooms. People like Joe Rogan, people like Tucker Carlson, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, and the Daily Wire team. All of these alternative opinions, and they're not alternative, they're actually mainstream, but they're alternative in the sense of the schooling system, are there to give these kids who may not necessarily believe what their teacher is saying a little bit of intellectual stimulation. And you know, what if there's a 14, 15-year-old kid who wants to ask questions of their teacher, and they want to access this through social media? These clips, you know, there are so many clips of Joe Rogan going around talking about very relevant things, but these kids aren't going to be able to see these anymore. And why is that? That's because it's easier to censor and silence rather than be challenged. And yes, I agree, of course, there's parental responsibility in that, and a child should come home and a parent can talk to them about different views, but cutting off alternative views that they can see online is just another way of being able to control kids, and kids who then grow up to become adults, and then, you know, they vote and so on and so forth. And that's why we become progressively more left-wing and progressive as the generations go on. I think the left-wing government that we have now in Australia and left-wing governments across the world are really starting to freak out, because they've seen that there's this whole new push with this Donald Trump victory of people demanding to have their freedoms back. And they're kind of like, oh shit, you know, we've had a good 5 years of being able to control our people, and now people are starting to question things all over again. So they've really started to scramble, and they're trying to introduce these bills and these laws to try and claw back some of that control that they feel like they're going to lose, and they are going to lose. And you know, you can just see the desperation. It reeks of desperation that the government feels like they're losing control and they have to get it back somehow, and they're starting with the kids. As I said, this is not an area where the government needs to be able to control us. You know, we are grown adults. We live supposedly in a democracy. We don't need the government's input in every single aspect of our lives, especially parenting. Because what we're going to end up as is literally what they do in North Korea. Like, parents are there literally just to breed. And then the state takes over their education, and then everyone ends up thinking the same. And yeah, it's an extreme example, but you know, when you cut off the media supply, that's what happens. When you don't give alternative opinions, especially in a classroom, that's what happens. It's not that far-fetched to think that all of our kids are going to end up thinking the same thing, and it's kind of already started. That's why younger generations are so progressive, they're so left-wing, they're so anti-everything, as you see in universities with these like pro-Palestine protests and the climate change protests and the gender protests. They're just so combative against everything that slightly resembles conservative views. And that's just going to continue and continue, especially as we cut off resources from kids. I don't have kids, but when and if I do, I want my kids to be able to be challenged, learn from a range of different sources, have their intellect and their brain stimulated by different things, look at different perspectives, challenge them, be critical of them, and then they can come to their own conclusion. That's what we should be teaching kids in schools, but we don't. We teach the opposite. Having less touch points for kids to be able to learn things is not a good thing. It will only end in disaster, and that's what we truly need to push back on. It's not now, it's in the future. It's in 10 years' time when we have little robots running around, all clones of each other. It's not a society we want to live in. And I mean, the most obvious thing, this is a stupid law on every level, but VPNs, have they not heard of VPNs? Kids are smart these days. They're going to get around it. So can the government just please back off? We don't want you involved in things like this. Leave it up to the parents. Let kids be kids. Let them argue with each other. Let them sort things out. Let their parents get involved. Let their parents teach them right from wrong. This is not a governmental issue. This is a parental and a family issue, and that's how it should stay.